Welcome to the Sweepstakes College Baseball podcast, where we run through all the news of the past week in college baseball, starting with our initial topic of Arkansas. Now we're 7 weeks through the season, and Arkansas has not slipped up at all. Their starting rotation looks by far the best in the nation right now. They're pitching just top notch and similar to kind of what we saw last year with Wake Forest, but Arkansas is in the SEC, so brings it up even another notch competition wise. So for them to just succeed every test, not even just pass, just absolutely blow it out by flying colors, super impressive for this Arkansas squad. And their offense, they don't just have one guy or a few guys that seem to be lighting it up. It's just a real cumulative effort all over the place. And yeah, really led by the pitching staff, but the offense, it's just like no matter what, somebody's going to have a good day, but it's not always the same person.
Yeah, it's really nice when you have a well-rounded team like that where you're not relying on one person in particular. It seems like a lot of teams, if they have a guy like a Hagen Smith, you're just solely relying on that Friday win. Might not have a lot else to back it up on the pitching staff. Or like you said, on the offensive end, you might have a guy or two, but you don't really know where your run support is coming otherwise. But these guys just get it from everywhere. Everyone on the roster is contributing. And yeah, just a really well-rounded team. And to be handling business the way they have in the SEC is super impressive.
Yeah, and jumping from the strengths of Arkansas, we're going to go to our player of the week, which was Connor Madison, GCU pitcher who threw a no-hitter, including 10 strikeouts, and he's just a freshman, so really, really impressive stuff by him. Like I mentioned, just a freshman and had a rough start to the season, but the past few starts have been really, really superb, and, capping that off with a no-hitter is most weeks that's going to be a player of the week caliber performance. There are a few weeks where, that might not get the spotlight, but definitely will get, brought to our attention. But this week, just by far the best performance out there. There wasn't any real crazy standout performances. Otherwise, there are a few other good players, but I feel like when you got a no-hitter, you got to have something super, super, unique to be able to top that.
Yeah, it feels like every year we see a couple combined no-hitters, and then here or two we see a true no-hitter pitcher doing it himself. Usually comes when you sift down the competition, go down some levels, not necessarily in the power conferences, although it does happen there occasionally. But no matter what level you're at, it's just incredibly impressive to do it as a freshman. It takes a lot to succeed as a freshman pitcher in college baseball. Even the most talented freshmen, a lot of the time you just see them excelling in long relief roles, just coming out of the bullpen. Not a lot of them get that nod to being a starter, and when they do, they're usually just middle of the road because it's their first year in college baseball. But to really be clicking the way he is right now and throw that complete game no hitter, just super impressive.
Yep. And next up, the top play of Week 7 in college baseball.
This one's drilled to left center. Trevor Marsh, opposite field, caught!
What a catch. Is that Bristol Carter on the catch there, and he hit that wall?
So here is Bristol Carter of ECU taking one for the team and just flying through the wall in center field to make the outstanding catch. You just got to highlight a play like that. Who knows if he knew that he was on the warning trap? Hopefully he did, but he definitely took one for the team there and committed 100% to catching that ball and did just that by splatting against the outfield fence.
Yeah, you just got to respect putting your body on the line like that. This is a complete full send, and he gets the catch. That would just be brutal to full send into the wall like that and not come away with the ball. So very glad that he came away with it, and just incredible play altogether.
Yeah, and next up is our patent pending sweep setback of the week. This week we're going to highlight LSU. Kind of was up in the air between LSU and Wake Forest. Both of them have been struggling mightily the past few weeks, but we're going to give the nod to LSU in this position right now after they got swept by Arkansas over the weekend. Really not the best look there. Would have liked to see them get one win, especially now that they're sitting at 2-7 in conference play, and doesn't look like it's going to be getting much easier for them in the near future. So real tough start to the season in conference, and for a team that was expected to be one of the best in the nation, got to be playing better than they are right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is starting to look like following the trend of 3 straight years of SEC teams really struggling after winning the championship. This LSU team has a lot of talent. A couple of those games against Arkansas looked pretty winnable. They weren't absolutely out of them whatsoever. They were competitive, but not able to get a win. And like you said, 2-7 in SEC play is very tough. They've played some solid competition, but when you're trying to be a competitor and you're trying to be a team that's vying for a hosting and to be just a contender in college baseball in general, you have to win games, and they're just not doing that right now.
Yeah, real tough spot for LSU, especially with the schedule that they have coming up. But now we will jump into our series prediction results, where we go through 5 series from the week coming up and predict who we think the winners are going to be. Now, both of us had all right weeks, going 3-2. We had 2 out of the 3 series that we both predicted the same way come up in the right side of things, so we love to see that. Definitely helps out overall. Now I'm sitting at 18-17, Kevin at 16-19, so slowly getting back to 500 overall. Hopefully we can get some momentum from the past week and turn things around. But yeah, I feel like you missed out on an easy one there with taking LSU over Arkansas when Arkansas was the pretty obvious choice at home and the number 1 team. Decided to go with your gut there, and this time it didn't pay off.
Yeah, definitely a tough one, but was trying to get one back on you and thought LSU would be pretty competitive, and they actually were, but I thought maybe they would be able to pull that off, especially after losing 2 series in a row. Felt like they really needed that one, and they did, because they plummeted down our rankings and most rankings across the country. And they were competitive, so tough overall. And yeah, should have just taken the easy one, especially with Arkansas at home.
Yeah, and I thought kind of the same way for the Wake Forest North Carolina game, taking kind of the safer pick with the home team and technically who we had higher in the rankings at that point. But that one went the other direction with North Carolina looking like the way more complete team. Wake Forest continuing to struggle there, especially on the pitching side, which was supposed to be the saving grace for this team. Really supposed to set them up pretty much every weekend for a low-run game, but has not been the case at all, and especially the past week with Chase Burns struggling a little bit, gave up a few more runs than we've seen the past few starts from him. He got moved up into that first slot of the weekend series, so maybe there was a little bit more pressure on him to perform and wasn't able to get that done. But yeah, I mean, when he's not clicking on all cylinders, then it's going to be a real struggle for this Wake Forest pitching staff right now.
Yeah, there's been a lot of fluidity between the upper tier and mid tier of the ACC so far this year. I mean, Clemson's the mainstay at the top now, but there's been a lot of switching from the top to mid there, and it feels like this week was North Carolina jumping into that upper echelon, and really just a complete series, especially sweeping Wake on the road there makes it that much more impressive, and Wake dropping more to the middle tier and maybe even back end of that as they struggle to win any series in conference play.
Yeah, and now we'll jump into our rankings, starting things off in the same place we have been the past few weeks. Number 1, staying there, is Arkansas, kind of separating themselves even from the next few teams here. I think they've just passed everything, succeeded in every game that they've really had to go up against a test. And yeah, now sitting at 23-3 after a 4-0 week and sweeping what was number 8 LSU. Just super impressed overall by both the pitching and the offense of this Arkansas squad.
Yeah, really impressive sweep. We thought this would be a competitive series, and it was. It was close games, but Arkansas handles business. And yeah, like we mentioned at the start of this video, just a really complete team, able to win games in multiple ways, and that's a strength that you need to be a national title contender. It's hard to when your team's only able to win games in one way, but this team really has it all, and yeah, just super complete so far.
And next up, we have Clemson jumping up one spot to number 2 now, going 2-1 at Miami the past week. And I think that's a pretty impressive week. We've seen Miami at home has been a challenge to beat, and Clemson had the opportunity to win all 3 of those games, came up short in just one of them. So, yeah, overall, super impressive week, especially when there are a few top 10 teams that struggled a bit.
Yeah, this Clemson team is in a really good spot right now. They don't really have too many tough series throughout the rest of ACC play. They've had 3 tough ones to start off the season, and they've handled it extremely well. And for me, it's Arkansas Clemson in a league of their own, 1-2. Arkansas has completely handled SEC play, but Clemson's right there too, has 15 Q1 wins. There's no other team even in double digits at this point. So super impressive the quality of teams they've played, and they've been able to handle it. And they've had a lot of close games, but I keep going back to it. They just have that it factor for me. They're able to pull off wins, and they just find a way. And some teams have that, some teams don't, and so far they do.
Yeah, it's similar to kind of what we saw early in the season with TCU, where there were a lot of games where it seemed like TCU shouldn't have won. But now we're a lot further in, and Clemson has won games in pretty much every manner. So it's a little bit more seeing kind of just every aspect of their game instead of TCU, where it was just playing close games and winning them all at the beginning of the season. So definitely have more ability to see that Clemson should be a team at the top at this point. But jumping from there, number 3, we have Texas A&M also going up one spot, going 4-0 the past week and sweeping Auburn on the weekend. Super impressive to be able to pull off that sweep. All those games were pretty close, so very competitive series overall. Auburn seems like they've just been getting super unlucky every single week at this point in SEC play. They're a team that in other situations could be a ranked team if they could get just a few more wins out of it, but now really on the other side of things at this point. But Texas A&M was able to get the job done there and pull off the sweep, which was very impressive.
Yeah, Texas A&M has looked really complete up until this point. They were undefeated for one of the longest times in the country. I think second to Florida State, and they've continued to play well even through SEC play. The one series loss coming on the road at Florida, who just doesn't lose weekend series. But Texas A&M overall just looks really complete. And yeah, sweeping Auburn is more impressive than it looks when you look at Auburn's SEC record. That team is pretty good. They just do not have the wins in conference play to show for it right now.
Yep, and following Texas A&M, we have Tennessee at 4, also going up one spot from last week after a 3-1 week and winning the series versus Georgia over the weekend. Really started to look like Tennessee was in pretty big trouble at the beginning of the weekend. Georgia won the first game and looked like they had the second game handled, but Tennessee really turned up the offense late and was able to put up 2 6-run innings in the back half of the game. So Tennessee was able to turn that around and kind of never look back at that point, winning the series. Georgia is a team that can kind of fight with any offense out there, and Tennessee is one of the best in the nation, so it was a really battle of the bats the past weekend, and Tennessee was able to pull through and win at home and, yeah, secure going up the rankings one spot.
Yeah, this Tennessee team's really talented in the position player group. There is some talent on the mound as well, but so far it really does seem like their strength is winning those shootout type of games where they can just outscore you. We've seen it a couple times where they get down a couple runs, but the offense is able to come through and just pour on more numbers. So, yeah, good team overall. I don't know if they're as complete as some of these other teams at the top of the SEC, but I mean it's just messy in that conference overall, and so they're finding a way right now and winning series.
Yep, and now next up at number 5, we have Oregon State dropping back 3 spots after going 0-2 at USC the past week. So bad week overall. Wasn't able to pick up a midweek win either. So yeah, only playing 2 games and losing both of them. Not a great look, especially against a USC team that has kind of been struggling throughout the season so far this year. And USC, even though it was on the road for Oregon State, USC doesn't have a home field this year, so not really a true road game. So yeah, losing both of those, not the best look for an Oregon State team that hadn't had a bad weekend yet. So this is their first one on the record, so not terrible, but definitely want to switch things back on in a conference that they should probably easily win at this point.
Yeah, not a good week whatsoever. Luckily, it was only 2 losses. But like you said, also tough that there wasn't a midweek game to pick up the easy win, make it look a little better. Really, the first blemish on the resume for Oregon State. That's why you only see them dropping back to 5 here. If it becomes a habit, we don't think it will, given the strength of the Pac-12 this year. Then you'll see them drop more. But I think this is a solid team, and I think they'll get right back on track.
Yeah, and next up at 6, we have Florida staying in that spot. Once again, the toughest team to rank in the top 25. Just don't know what to do with them. Now sitting at 16-11, once again a 2-2 week, getting absolutely demolished by Florida State in the midweek, and then winning the weekend series versus Mississippi State. And, at this point, it's like, part of me just wants them to lose a weekend series so we can kind of drop them back. It's ridiculous at this point that you have a team that has so many more losses than any other team in the top 10, just sitting at the 6th spot. Having 7 more than the team right above them is crazy. And at this point, Florida got the job done on the weekend. Didn't look that impressive. They needed walk-offs to get the job done. Caglione finishing the series off with a walk-off home run late to cap off that. But it's tough to rely on the heroics when your team is just piling up those losses at this point.
Yeah, they continue to win the weekend series, and you got to tip your cap to that. This Mississippi State team is pretty solid. Definitely my personal 26 team, just right outside the rankings. They've lost two series in a row, but 4 and 5 through SEC play against really tough competition. I think they're a solid team. And Florida just struggles in the midweeks, finds a way on the weekends, but it kind of makes you worry about them in a regional setting if they have to get through to a 4th game. Can they really put it together for a whole weekend rather than just that 3-game series? They really haven't had the sweeps get put together either. And so that means they'd be dropping a game, having to play a 4th game. And from what we can tell right now, they can't win a 4th game in a week.
Yeah, definitely would be the case at this point. But now at number 7, we have another SEC team in Vanderbilt going 4-0 the past week. Sweeping Missouri, so got the job done against kind of the bottom of the SEC, so racking up those wins there, which you kind of need to do at this point. They jumped up 2 spots from last week. Wasn't all that impressive of a weekend. Their pitching looked really good, but the offense was just kind of invisible and just enough to get them over the line there. But, still was able to pull off a 4-0 week, so jumping up a few spots after a few other top 10 teams didn't look great.
Yeah, 4-0 week, and like you said, not really all that impressive. Missouri is the bottom feeder in the SEC, just not really all that talented, at least by that conference standards. And, you kind of expect Vandy to sweep that series. They take care of business and handle it well, and, they've played well for the most part outside of getting swept by South Carolina. So good weekend to get back on track and have a huge weekend ahead of them coming up too.
Yep, and now at number 8, we have Duke also going up 2 spots from last week after a 3-1 week with what was ranked Campbell winning that midweek game and then winning the weekend series versus what was number 7 Virginia. So really good bounce back after a little bit of a bad stretch there for this Duke squad. Now they're sitting at 6-6 overall in conference, so not a terrible spot to be after only facing ranked teams so far. So Duke team still definitely on the upper side of the ACC right now, even though their record maybe not dictating that.
Yeah, still high on this team overall. Have some faith that that pitching staff can kind of put things together, especially late in games. And this was a week where they're trending back in the right direction. Still want to see them put it together consistently over multiple weekends in a row. But like you said, picking up that midweek win against Campbell was also solid there. So yeah, just looking like a solid team overall, and just want to see the consistency on top of it too.
Yep, and now following them up at number 9, we have another ACC team in North Carolina after a 4-0 week and going to what was number 11 Wake Forest and pulling off the sweep. So just really impressive results on the weekend. Their offense was electric. I think they hit like 13 or something home runs over the weekend, so really impressive. I mean, this Wake Forest staff has really been struggling recently, but North Carolina took full advantage of that and put up some really good numbers and able to capitalize on a struggling team in Wake Forest that really should be at the top of the ACC.
Yeah, North Carolina, one of the better teams there with 2 series losses on the year to East Carolina and Miami. But they were competitive in both of those series. They've been competitive against upper competition throughout the year, and this was no exception here, getting a sweep on the road at Wake. Super impressive, even with how poorly Wake Forest has been playing. Still says a lot, and yeah, it speaks wonders anytime you're able to pull that off on the road.
Yep, and at 10, another ACC team again with Virginia in that spot after going 2-2 the past week. Like we mentioned, losing the series at Duke. So kind of what you expect out of a team that goes on the road and plays a top 10 team there, but would like to see them take advantage of what was a stumbling Duke team and just weren't able to capitalize there, but still look like a pretty solid squad overall.
Yeah, not a bad week at 2-2. Like you mentioned, would love to take that series there and really just help build the resume, but they've still been competitive against some top competition in the ACC, continue to play well overall, and not really overly concerned with the week.
Yep, and at 11 is our first mid-major team with Dallas Baptist sitting there after a 4-0 week, playing lesser competition with UTA in the midweek, and then New Mexico State on the weekend. So just got the job done there, racking up wins where they need to be, and so they'll continue to slowly go up the rankings if they can keep up this pace.
Yeah, I mean, didn't play great competition, but handled it well. And, some of those wins in non conference play, like the win over Alabama, is starting to look better and better as Alabama climbs up the rankings. And so I do think this team's solid. And yeah, as we have it right now, the best mid major in the country. And I think that's pretty valid. I think this is a team with hosting aspirations. And, if they continue to handle business the way they have, maybe even getting into the national seed range.
Yep, and at 12, speaking of the team they beat, is Alabama. Now with a 3-1 week and winning the weekend series versus what was number 14 South Carolina. So great week winning that series and getting back on track. At home we've seen the home field advantage be huge in the SEC this year with I think like 26 out of like 30 weekend series going to the home team in the SEC. So super, super impressive, but taking advantage of that situation there, and Alabama just slowly climbing up, jumping up 4 spots here after a few of those teams in the 10 to 15 range struggling a little bit, so able to capitalize there.
Yeah, like you said, home teams are continuing to dominate in the SEC play, but anytime you pick up a ranked series win, you'll take that no matter where it is, and Alabama overall has continued to play pretty well. Would like to see a little more consistency, but like we've said in SEC play, it's really a toss-up of what you're getting week to week. It seems like this year, even more than previous years, there's going to be a lot of teams around that like 16 and 14 mark at the end of the year, just barely scratching by trying to get a hosting spot.
Yeah. At 13 now we have Florida State jumping up 4 spots as well after a 3-1 week, beating what was, I guess, and still is, number 6 Florida in a dominant fashion, and then winning the weekend series versus Louisville. So great week to get back on track, especially the midweek. That was mostly what impressed me. The weekend versus Louisville is what it is. I kind of expect those results from a team in the rankings against Louisville, who hasn't looked great this year. But yeah, the dominant win versus Florida was impressive, even though Florida can't get what seems like any wins during the midweek. Still, Florida team, is as talented as it is, and somehow is able to pull off those weekend wins every single week. So they obviously have that same talent in the midweek, but just somehow can't get any sort of wins there. But Florida State taking full advantage of that.
Yeah, like you said, Florida State's taking advantage of that fact that Florida cannot hang in the midweeks. You'll take that RPI boost getting 2 wins against Florida now in those midweek games, and Florida State's now up to second in RPI, looking really good. They continue to handle business in ACC play like they did against Louisville this weekend. They're going to look like to be locked up for hosting, probably as a top 8 seed too. And yeah, they're looking like they're in that upper region of the ACC right now.
Yeah, and I guess you could say that Florida State now has the only series win versus Florida on the year, since they have played more than one game now. But yeah, definitely a little different than a weekend series win for sure. But going 2-0 against Florida is impressive by itself. But after that, we have East Carolina at 14 going up 1 spot. Going 4-0 the past week against UNCW and UAB on the weekend. So sweep is a good result there, and good to get back on track for this East Carolina team that struggled a little bit last week, but it was against lesser competition, so kind of expect those results there.
Yeah, exactly what we expected this week, but props to them for taking care of it. That's all you can do when you're a mid-major playing lesser competition, is just continue to rack up the wins, and good for them to get back on track there.
Yep, and at 15 we have NC State after a 3-0 sweep versus Notre Dame on the weekend. So good job, good results there. A few of the games were probably a little closer than they wanted. That they definitely could have lost, but got the job done in the end and ended up going 3-0. So going up 3 spots in our rankings.
Yeah, like you said, some of those games were close. They looked down and out of it in that Sunday game going into the bottom of the ninth, down 2, even with 2 outs, still down 2, but got a 3-run walk-off home run, able to pull out that win. And yeah, at the end of the week, they got 3 W's, and that's all we're going to look back at the end of the year.
Yeah, for sure. And now at 16, we have LSU dropping back 8 spots from last week after going 1-3, getting swept at number 1 Arkansas on the weekend. So obviously the best team to get swept by, but now overall, we talked about it earlier in the episode, LSU now sitting at 2-7 in conference, and it's not going to get any easier really over the next few weeks. So they got to find wins somewhere, and they haven't been able to yet. And so they're very quickly dropping down in our rankings.
Yeah, I mean, I think most weeks, if a ranked team gets swept on the road at the number 1 team, you're not going to see them drop 8 spots probably. But when you lose 3 series in a row, that's what happens. You just have to find a way to win games, have to find a way to win one of those series if you want to be ranked highly and considered a contender. And right now, LSU is just not playing at that level.
Yep, and at 17, we have UC Irvine after a 4-0 week at LMU in the midweek, and then going to Hawaii for the sweep on the weekend. And UC Irvine just continues to rack up those wins. And the Hawaii series, maybe it doesn't look great on paper from this Hawaii team, but they were pretty hot recently, and it's always tough to play at that Hawaii atmosphere. It's far away from pretty much any other team you're going to travel to, and it's a completely different environment. So UC Irvine going there and sweeping them is super impressive.
Yeah, never easy to win a series on island time away from the mainland, but able to win it and able to sweep. So very impressive. And yeah, UC Irvine's looking like one of the best mid-majors in the country right now.
Yep, and at 18 we have South Carolina dropping back 4 spots from last week after going 2-2 and losing the series at what was number 16 Alabama, now number 12 Alabama. So it was an okay week, kind of what you'd expect, especially with the SEC record on the road, not looking that great. But, the South Carolina team, if they want to be seen as one of the best SEC teams and one of the best teams in the nation, you kind of got to beat those mid to upper level SEC teams on the road in order to jump up the rankings a lot.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with that one. Good week, 2-2. Tough to win the series on the road, and to move up the rankings consistently, you do have to pull off those series. It's really not a bad week going 2-2, losing a series on the road in SEC play. But to move up, you have to win some of those at least, and they're just not able to do that right now.
Yep, and at 19, we have Coastal Carolina staying in that spot after going 2-1 at ULM. A decent week, but probably would have liked to see a sweep here, even though it was on the road. Decent result, but should definitely be kind of outclassing some of their competition like this.
Yeah, definitely would like to see a sweep, and I think that's the difference between a Coastal team that we've seen near the top 10 of the rankings and the one that now finds themselves down near around the 20 mark. Just not having that extra oomph in those series against mid-major teams. They looked good at the start of the year, but 2-1, would like to see a sweep there and just need to put it together a little bit more.
Yep, and at 20, we have Kentucky going up 2 spots from last week after a 4-0 week and sweeping Ole Miss on the road. So really impressive weekend. Would have liked to maybe jump them up a few more spots here, but Kentucky kind of before the past few weeks hadn't played anybody. Their record was amazing, but really hadn't proven themselves at all. So they're slowly starting to do that. Ole Miss was a team that was pretty close to jumping in the rankings the past few weeks, but has stumbled as of late. But yeah, Kentucky takes full advantage of it, and getting a sweep on the road is super impressive in the SEC. I mean, it is anywhere, but especially in the SEC, like we've mentioned, with how many of those series just automatically going to the home team there, Kentucky is able to flip the script and, pull off an impressive sweep.
Yeah, this team's playing well, but have also just really benefited from a weak start to the SEC schedule. They're playing good teams, but not the upper level of the SEC. This team's really needs to rack up the wins early because they're probably not getting any late for their last 5 series are against top 10 teams in the country. And, it'd be impressive if they're able to win maybe 4 of those games. So they really need to rack up these wins early. So props to them for doing that. It's a little difficult to see them maintain this over the course of the year.
Yeah, I mean, they're succeeding in what they need to do at this point, which is just get as many SEC wins as possible at this point now that they're, I think, have only 1 loss so far in conference play. So they're doing all they can do at this point, but definitely have big tests just around the corner coming up. But at 21 now, we have Virginia Tech staying in the same spot after going 3-1. Not much movement in the back end of our top 25 here, just a lot of teams kind of doing what they needed to do the past week, so not really anywhere for them to go. So 3-1 here after winning the series versus Pitt. So good weekend and good week overall against what seems like lesser opponents, but gets the job done here and only gets 1 loss on their overall record here.
Yeah, Virginia Tech's looking like they're playing pretty well right now and maybe trying to enter that conversation of getting into that middle tier of the ACC and maybe moving up through that. Would like to see them. Would like to see how they play against some of the upper teams in that conference to really judge the quality there. Haven't quite played those super high-end series yet, so looking forward to that, but so far handling business.
Yeah, and next up we have our biggest dropper of the week, which is Wake Forest, now at 22. dropping back 11 spots this past week after going 1-3 and getting swept versus what was number 13 North Carolina, now number 10. Just really can't figure anything out right now in this Wake Forest squad. All over the place. They really got to turn things around quick. It seems like their schedule is getting a little easier coming right up. So at this point, they just need to get back on track and start getting those series wins, and they have the ability to do that with the opportunity and schedule that's right in front of them. But now this is the only other team besides Florida with at least 10 losses in the top 25. So it's funny that they're so far away, but Wake Forest definitely has not proven themselves, while Florida has on the weekend.
Yeah, I feel like this Wake team's just not playing very well right now, but if you're a Wake fan, I do think it's nice to look at that schedule ahead and know that there's some very winnable series on the horizon. And, the talent on this team is one capable of being one of the best teams in the country. We haven't seen them play at that level yet. But, as we know in college baseball, a lot of times it's that team that's heats up at the end of the year and goes into the tournament playing really well and getting hot. And that could be Wake Forest if they start to turn things around, get in a groove, and really find their identity. I think this team has the makeup to get there. They just haven't really found that rhythm at the moment.
Yep, and at 23, we have TCU staying in the same spot, even though they went 3-0 the past week. They swept Houston on the weekend at home. So really good week, finally getting some conference wins, which they really need to do in order to stay in the rankings here. Unfortunately, weren't able to jump up at all because of just everybody doing well at the back end of the rankings. But yeah, TCU finally getting some wins in conference and back on track here, and hopefully able to turn things around for the entirety of the Big 12 here, which is pretty much almost all out of the top 25 now.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult to move up the rankings when you're the only team in the conference ranked. We'll see that with Oregon State as well. There's just not a lot of opportunity for quality wins, and TCU really stumbled at the start of conference play. Good to have this 3-0 week here, get back on the right track, and there's plenty of opportunity ahead to win games, but the Big 12 just looks like a mess right now.
Yep, and at 24, we have Oregon after going 4-0 at home versus Seattle U. So, good week. Got the job done against what is looking like a not great team in Seattle. So, yeah, just did what they needed to do. No opportunity for them to go up the ranking here, but yeah, at least they're staying in for now.
Yeah, similar to the mid-major teams, just handling business against lesser competition in a non-conference week here. So good week, not super impressive, but you'll take it and handle business.
Yep, and at 25, the last of our rankings is our one and only team jumping in to the top 25 here, and that is Nebraska. After going 3-0 at Northwestern, they just continue to rack up wins against teams they should beat, or, if you want to be that top level of the Big Ten, you should be beating here. And they keep passing the test when a lot of other Big Ten teams have not. And, yeah, they've kind of isolated themselves as the one team right now that could potentially be in the rankings from the Big Ten here. And, yeah, they're jumping in this week after Campbell didn't have the best week and drops out from that 25 spot.
Yeah, nice to get a Big Ten team in here. Nebraska has handled business for the most part, have played fairly well against the solid competition they have faced, and, a lot of opportunity to continue to rack up wins throughout Big Ten play. We'll see if they're able to hold on to that. If they slip up, that's an easy dropout for them, but we do like to give some opportunity to teams that won't see as much opportunity to jump in the rankings as some of those mid-level teams in the better conferences will.
Yeah, and now teams right outside the top 25, I think, got to still mention Campbell. They went 2-2 the past week, won their weekend series on the road at Elon, which is a pretty decent result, but unfortunately lost their midweek at Duke, which is what you kind of want to get the wins out of when you are a mid-major team, and Campbell hasn't racked up a ton of wins recently. They've been struggling a little bit, so dropping from that 25 spot out maybe a little harsh, but they're still right on the outside looking in. Similarly, Mississippi State, the team that was number 26 last week, might still be in that spot even after losing their weekend series at Florida, but maybe should have won it. They definitely could have won that series, and still going 2-2 the past week. Overall, their record in conference isn't bad, like we mentioned, but they just need to get a weekend series win to jump in the rankings, and they have the opportunity to do it this coming weekend, but they still need to get the job done. But if they do, they'll definitely jump in.
Yeah, I'm personally very high on this Mississippi State team. I think if they were in the rankings prior to SEC play, they'd still be in there because you have 3 series against LSU, Texas A&M, Florida. You go 4-5 in that with 2 of the series on the road. I think you're definitely happy, especially not as a team at the very top of the SEC right now. And so I think they're quality games, and a lot of those losses were tight games, winnable as well. They've won some tight games too, but it's a good sign to be competitive in those losses, and they look like they can hang with those top teams in the conference.
Yeah, and similar to them is Georgia, which is their opponent this upcoming week. If either of them, one of them is obviously going to win, so probably the winner of that series will be jumping into the top 25 if they can take care of business on the midweek as well, especially for Georgia. If Mississippi State goes 2-2 and wins their weekend series, they will most likely be jumping in unless there's a huge shock or everybody wins in the top 25 or something like that. But Georgia also a team that is probably just right there on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I think Georgia's right there as well. One other team for me is Louisiana. Has continued to rack up some wins. Didn't play great in that Astros foundation, but they were competitive with both Vanderbilt and LSU. Played tight games with 2 of those teams, so gotta tip your cap to that, especially for a mid-major. And they've started to handle business in conference play as well. And so I think if they continue to rack up some wins and stay hot, that's a team you could see jump into.
Yep, and then a few more just to rattle off. Not going to go super in depth on them, but teams that are probably in that 26 to 35 range. We have Lamar, which is a new name that we haven't talked about for past few weeks. Indiana State, that's a team that we've continued to mention here. UC Santa Barbara also has been in the conversation, has jumped into the top 25 a few times. UCF, a new team, maybe that Big 12 team that could jump into the top 25 here if they can continue to play well. Speaking of the Big 12, also Texas Tech, if they can just continue to get some wins here, could make an appearance back into the top 25. And also we have Southern Miss, a team that has played a lot of tough competition but does have decent amount of losses, so not in the top 25 right now. But besides that, that is, I think, a wrap for this episode of the Sweepstakes College Baseball Podcast. Keep an eye out later this week for more weekend series predictions, where we will go through the top 5 series, or at least what we think might be the most interesting series for this upcoming week, and make our predictions there. So stay tuned for that, and see you next time. Goodbye.